Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you again so much for joining us today. My name is Elijah Marquez, and I'm the Community Education Manager at Mission Hospice and Home Care. Mission Hospice is an independent nonprofit hospice serving the San Francisco Peninsula and South Bay area for over 40 years. At Mission Hospice, we believe that everyone in the last phase of their life deserves care that is aligned with their beliefs, wishes, and values. So we are committed to providing compassionate and personalized education such as this, as well as transitions, palliative, and hospice care to all members of our community. And you could visit us at missionhospice.org if you'd like to learn more. Today's program is being recorded and will be shared to our YouTube page. So if you'd like to watch it again or share it with your own community, feel free to do so. You can check out Mission Hospice's YouTube page for the link for this program and the program that we had last week featuring Dana as well. Our workshop presenter, Dana, will be asking for your experiences, comments, questions throughout the program. So feel free, if you would like to remain anonymous, to put those in the chat, and I will happily read any of your comments or questions aloud. If you'd like to, during the moments where she asks for responses, you can also unmute yourself and respond aloud. And this workshop will focus on offering meaningful consolation to all people experiencing grief and sadness. Specifically, today's session will talk about how we can move from pep talks to compassion and empathy. This is Dana's second session with Mission Hospice of a 3-part series. So feel free to join for the next one or watch the recordings of the last ones if you are interested. Again, those are on YouTube. And in her last program, we learned how we can use the power of our own words to positively comfort and uplift those who are grieving. So I'm really looking forward to what today's workshop has to teach all of us together. And with that all said, it is my pleasure to introduce our program facilitator and author of the Condolences Pocket Guide, What to Say and Not to Say to Grievers, Dana Amarisa. If you can give us a little wave, Dana.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for coming. And I'm really excited about this because I get to be in my favorite type of conversation with you. A conversation about compassion in condolences and how to actually get there, because there's a little trick to it, because we can operate in a really guarded fashion, and getting ourselves to drop our guard can be done. We just have to know we need to do it. So today we're going to be focusing on the 4 types of condolences that grievers find unhelpful or painful. And we're going to actually use these condolences as our guide, our roadmap. It's actually going to be the key for us to learn what we need to do. Each of us will need to learn a little something different about what we need to do to drop our guard and our defenses and to open ourselves to compassion. But before we get into that, can I see how many people may have attended or watched the first one yet? Can you raise your hand? All right, I can't see anyone else, so maybe.
I do see a couple familiar names.
Okay, great.
We've got one hand up now.
Okay, Paul, thanks. Thanks for coming. Yeah, so before we get into the 4 types of condolences that I urge people to not use, let me give you a little background on how I ended up studying condolences for 20 years. Back in the year 2000, my husband and I lost our infant daughter, Zoe. And then 7 months later, my dad died. And about a year after that, we lost our toddler son, Jake. And that was really hard, really painful, as you might imagine. But what was the most surprising, actually shocking, was what our dear, caring friends and family said to us. It was painful. They struggled to know what to say and do to help us. We couldn't explain what we needed, and we needed their help. So back then, I wished I had a little pamphlet or a little book that could explain what I needed at a time when I couldn't do it. And because I knew that if I had that book in hand, I could say, I can tell that you care, but I can't explain what I need. So here's a book that explains it. And I think it'll help us get through this together. And so I wrote this book, Condolences Pocket Guide, in a small format, open to any page, because I wanted it to be super easy, thumbs up, thumbs down, for anyone who wants some information, even if all people do is go to the back where there's lists of helpful and unhelpful condolences. It's just page after page with ones that aren't helpful and ones that are helpful. That is enough often for people to go, oh, okay, I get it. So I was telling a girlfriend about this situation, and I realized, well, I can write this book because I'm a marketing writer. And so I started interviewing people, and I talked to hundreds of grieving people and hundreds of friends and family. And I asked the grievers what helped and what didn't, and took a lot of notes about the common themes that came through with them. And with friends and family, I asked them what made saying condolences so hard. How could deeply caring people feel so ill-equipped to help their friends? And so 20 years later, I published this book, and it's available on Amazon. I'll put all the links to my book and my my website, which I established. Once I published the book, I realized that there's a greater need than one book, that people need a lot of support and education in an ongoing way to shift these cultural habits that we have that make condolences so difficult. And so I founded the Be a Bridge Condolences Project, and that has the mission of helping to ease conversations with people who are facing any type of loss by encouraging and educating their family, friends, and professional associates about consolation. So this is to bring awareness to grievers, to their friends and family, to everyone, to all of us as we navigate grief in all its forms. So the website has a lot of resources. There's a blog. Anyway, all of this stuff I'm going to put at the end. And so you don't have to worry about taking notes if you don't want to do that. So let's get back to condolences. Before we get into the 4 steps, has anyone here ever been in the middle of asking a grieving friend questions about their loss, or making a tiny suggestion to help them feel better, or trying to pep them up so they feel better or they don't hurt so badly? Has anyone been in the middle of this and wondered, is this the right thing to do? Anyone here want to raise your hand? Yeah. Looks like there might be a few people. Okay. And has anyone ever wondered, well, been so doubtful that they actually didn't reach out, or they took a long time before they reached out to someone that they knew needed, was hurting a lot, but because they didn't know what to say? Yeah, so there's a few people. But I believe that it's our intuition that even though we don't know what to say, we have a doubt that this is the right thing. And I think it's that very intuition that can help us to make better choices. And it's trusting that, and then a few more steps beyond that we're going to go through here. So often when we doubt what's going on, or we have doubts about what's going on, we doubt ourselves. And I'm saying that when we're connected to our intuition, we're spot on. And we can actually overcome those doubts with a little information. So what we're going to cover today is one of the doubts I used to have was people who were grieving looked like they were from a different planet, or they were acting that way. They were in such a different space, and I didn't know what space they were in. And so we're going to talk about what's actually going on with grievers, what's operating in their lives. And then we're going to look at the condolences that don't help. I've organized those into 4 categories because it's a little easier to work with them when you know that there's 4 different types. And we're going to learn how to have some curiosity about what these unhelpful condolences can actually help us do. So, and what they can help us do is to get to meaningful consolation. All right. So let's talk about grievers. How many here have, when they've dealt with a grieving friend, have had a sense that their friend was no longer in the same mindset, not mindset, but just like they were living on a different planet, like they were in a completely different space or state than we had ever seen them before? Anyone here? Couple of people. Well, they are in a different state. Well, one thing is, the biggest thing I felt when I was grieving was I realized that I had been stripped of my social protections. And these social protections, I would have done anything to have them back, and to just be able to have a carefree conversation about anything except what I was grieving about, because I was in so much pain so often that I just wanted a break from it. But I didn't know how to get there, and my friends didn't know how to help me get there. So these social protections are kind of a collective unspoken agreement we have. It's what we do when someone says, "Hey, how's it going?" And you go, "Good," even when it's not going good. It's just how we've agreed to interact with each other. And we have those in place so we don't spend every waking moment facing the fact that we could die at any moment, like now, or now, or now, because we would never get anything done, and it's too threatening. So grievers have had those social protections stripped off because, well, they're facing death. There's no way to avoid it. And they see that we have not, by the way we talk, by our pat condolences, that we still have our social protections up. And some of the social protections some of the signs that they've lost them is they will cry inappropriately. I, however, don't believe there is inappropriate, but collectively we've agreed that we don't burst out into massive sobbing in a public place, that we keep it at home. But when you're grieving, you can't ever tell when you're going to cry and when you're not going to, at least not at first anyway. Or some people pull way in and they're less animated, less forthcoming, and they withdraw from the way they have been in their life up until now. So when I was crying a lot, I felt ugly and like I was too much. A lot of grievers said that they felt like, why would anyone want to be with them? Because these are all things that are breaking the rules that we've all known since we were little kids. And the other thing is, grievers are in their hearts and their emotions. and the wisdom of their bodies, which we call intuition. And we tend to operate from our heads. Not everyone, of course. These are common themes that came out in all my interviews. Of course, there are going to be people who don't fall into this category, but we can talk about the general tendency when people are grieving is that they can't engage in light banter like they used to, that they feel deeply insecure for breaking societal rules. And what they need now is nothing they've asked us for, which is to show our vulnerability, to show our hearts. And they need people to stand with them and by them, even when they're doing this ugly crying, as it felt like I called it ugly when I was crying. And listening with acceptance, as opposed to listening for an opening for me to tell you what my thoughts are about your grieving or to pep you up. So we have a tendency to be in our minds, and that can make grievers feel very alone. They're not able to do their share of a friendship anymore, the kind of 50-50 thing. It's, well, I should give a call because I haven't heard from them in a while. They can't do that for a long time. And does this resonate with people? Who here has had something like this happen, either yourself as a griever or with a friend or family member? Would anyone like to say what it was like for you?
Can we speak up? Just speak.
Yeah, just
in our
jump
chat?
on in.
Yeah, so my name is Rini, and I know the grieving place very well. I lost my husband not long before COVID, before the pandemic. And so I really was stunned to hear from certain dear long-term friends what I felt was insensitive and at times even dismissive. So, from a griever standpoint, I hear all that you're saying really, really resonates. And it was just stunning to me how some people who I thought I could rely on so confidently were not able to see where I was. And the one thing I found that was the most helpful, supportive were those people who were just able to be with me in silence and witness my grief. And it was healing, it still is. And I will be forever grateful for that. The one thing that was really surprising to me is that on the one hand, I wanted to hear people acknowledge that Peter, my husband, was no longer here, and what I was going through. And on the other hand, it was like I wanted things to be normal. So it was within myself, there was some conflict there. And I was sometimes amazed, how can they go on being so happy and carefree, and that don't they know? Of course they knew my loss, but they couldn't experience it the way I did. So from a griever standpoint, so many inappropriate comments. On the other hand, I had so much love and support and still do. And I'm grateful for that. But it's a confusing and conflicting place to be in when you're grieving so deeply.
Yes, thank you
so
so much.
That's about all.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Mhm.
That confusion, because one minute I was minding my own business and the next minute I was sobbing uncontrollably. I had no idea what allowed me to be happy in those minutes and what allowed me to be so sad in the next moments. It was a constant surprise to me. So no wonder friends and family can be as shocked as I was. How about someone else? Would anyone else like to say their experience as a friend and family? Yeah. All right, well, we'll move on. So let's go to the 4 types of unhelpful condolences. Now, Again, these are themes that came out in my research. And when I say they're unhelpful, I'm saying that for the initial condolence that we give, and initially when people have just suffered their loss, these are best avoided. Certainly, for example, the 4 types are question condolences, advice and suggestion condolences, pep talk and silver lining condolences, and spiritual condolences. Certainly, later on, questions can be helpful if you know the person really well. Same with spiritual ideas, that can be helpful. It's just at first, it may not be. So, did anyone go to last week's seminar? I can't remember, did I already ask? Yeah, 2 people did. Okay, so last week's seminar, we learned a 3-step process for how to shift out of our minds and into our hearts as one path for getting to meaningful consolation. Today, we're going to look into the condolences that don't help as another path. They're like a trigger that we can use to see what will work. So let's start with question condolences. And to set everyone at ease, I'm going to tell you the worst condolence I've ever said, and it was a question. So I'm sure no one can top this one. So this is just to let you know that there's no judgments. We are here to have kindness and curiosity about what doesn't work and why, and from there to get to what can be a meaningful support for a grieving friend. So I was at a friend's house and she had a mutual acquaintance over, and he told me he had lung cancer. And what flew out of my mouth was, "Oh, are you a smoker?" Before I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," before I put my hand on my heart, before anything nice, I said, "Oh, are you a smoker?" And I saw, as soon as it came out, I knew it was the wrong thing to say. And this is after I've had my losses, and while I'm in the middle of writing this book, where it's really clear to me not to do it. And I give this example. Well, let me finish the story. So I said to him, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry I said that. That was so thoughtless. If you were to give me a chance to start over, what I really would like to say is I know a lot of friends who are smokers and they don't have lung cancer, and I'm just so very sorry that you do." And that did everything. I dropped my guard. I was vulnerable about the mistake I made, and he used that as an entree to talk about what his experience had been having cancer and how difficult it had been, losing his health and his sense of being able to live a long life. So has anyone here, we all know that that's an inappropriate thing to say, but what exactly makes it so bad? Who can say, what's wrong with this? Like, why is it bad? Why is it not helpful? You can post it in the chat, or you can just pop in and say what you think.
Okay, I tend to just speak up, so
Please do.
this is Rainey again. I think because it places the blame on the person who is experiencing it,
There's
and it makes
blame.
them the cause of their own condition or situation.
Yeah, it blames them for
Yeah,
their
blame.
misfortune. Okay.
Thank
And
you for sharing, Renee, or
yeah.
Renee, please excuse my mispronunciation. I would also add to that, when somebody is open and vulnerable with you and sharing something so deeply painful and personal to them, they're coming to you because they trust you and they're looking for comfort and comforting words. So for their first reaction to be something that is not comforting or supportive of the place that they're in, I think that could be seen as very harmful to their their own experience and emotions.
Great, great. So this is a perfect example of why question condolences can not be helpful right initially and right after the loss. Because, and any of these 4 condolences, the problem with them is, one, they're delivered unconsciously. I was completely unconscious. It flew out of my mouth. I didn't even register how I felt. It just came out. And that goes to what we covered quite a bit in the first workshop, that we are hardwired to protect ourselves from pain. And that was self-protective. When I looked at it later, I saw I really, really didn't want to feel how horrible it would be to have lung cancer and to know that I might not live to an old age because of it. And I protected myself from that. And it's not a problem to have those thoughts. What we think is not problematic. What turns out to be difficult is that it's unconscious. It's said without looking within, and whatever is in operation within me is going to be delivered to the griever. So I delivered a little shove. I do not want to feel this, and he felt it. I was withholding compassion because it was hard to be with him in his pain. But after a minute, I realized, well, I would like to be with him in this. Anyone else?
We do have a comment in the chat. It seems that there is judgment being made, this being a consequence of their actions, and there is also judgment being placed on how they are dealing with their grief. Thank you for sharing that.
Exactly right. Thank you. Yeah. So my social protections were up at that point. You know, it was just like this flip, as Rini said, it's dismissive. So, well, if you were a smoker, what, you deserve to die? So anyway, my solution. So one of the things, if we make a mistake, we can always apologize, and that is a vulnerable act, and it's that vulnerability that grievers are looking for. But I'm not asking us to wait till we make the mistake of saying one of these 4 types of unhelpful condolences. I'm saying the solution is to catch ourselves before we act, to notice our urge, notice what we want to say, like, oh, well, didn't they realize this could have happened? And it's like, and to stop ourselves before we act, and then have kindness and curiosity for those thoughts that we might feel kind of judgmental about, like, what on earth was wrong with you, Dana, for saying something like that? I'm not going to get anywhere with that. But if I go, oh, wow, I must have been worried about letting that in. Okay, I'm going to let that in. So does anyone else have an example of something that they said or thought about saying that they realized was sticking their foot in the mouth? Anyone like to share? I've said the worst one, so. Well, I can see why people wouldn't be rushing to admit these things. All right. So given that we can see there's a gap between what grieving people need and what we say to them, I have a little experiential process here that we can do together, because it's in the practice of these steps that we gain confidence that we can actually say meaningful consolation, regardless of whether we've ever done it before, or even if we're not a counselor or a grief counselor, we can learn to do this. It's the practice of opening to our best or higher self that actually gives us the confidence to open up to these meaningful conversations. And this is what we want out of life. We want to know that our life has meaning and that we have helped people, right? It's like we're all looking for meaning, and what more meaningful thing than to help someone who is hurting a lot. So who would like to do this practice? It's going to be an experiential one. So if you would like to, good, we have a couple of people. Put everything aside, get comfortable in your chair, and we're going to use a situation similar to the one that I have just told you, where I was kind of surprised by the news of someone's lung cancer, and surprised even more by my own reaction. So we're going to do a similar thing. So if you feel comfortable, close your eyes and get into your heart. And I'm going to tell you that about the loss of my children, that my husband and I lost our daughter and our son, not to death, but to failed adoptions. So notice, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? You thought that they had died because I didn't tell you. They didn't die. They were removed from us due to the adoption falling through. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Don't judge it. We all have these thoughts. We're hardwired to protect ourselves. And with that firmly in mind, we're going to make a shift. And to do that, we've noticed what we've thought. Let's do whatever you usually do to ground yourself, to get yourself out of your head. Some people like to breathe down into their torso, feet and legs, and into the earth. Some people put a hand on the heart. Or take a deep breath, a calming deep breath. And step 2, extend some curiosity and kindness to what was that thought that you might not be so thrilled about. And just see it as a thought. Nothing happened, you had a thought. And now that you're relaxed, what does this thought tell about you? You don't like surprises. You got news you didn't expect. Something you've never had to deal with before, and so you're a little nervous. You're confused. Like, how does that actually happen, that you have a failed adoption? Your mind wants to ruminate on that. And be with those ideas that maybe you just needed a little time to integrate it. Maybe you have judgments about adoption, or you have ideas about death being a greater loss than losing a child by adoption. You've ranked things as one being better or worse than the other. So with this information, you can drop in a little deeper. Like, okay, that's what I thought. But now that I'm sitting here in my body, in my heart, in my intuition, if someone told me they lost their child to failed adoption, what would I do or say a little bit differently? What's coming up from your heart, your unguarded place? And taking this new sense of how to be compassionate when we're surprised or stunned. When you're comfortable, come back into the room and open your eyes. And would anyone like to share about what they saw? What they thought before and what shifted and where they ended up?
I'm happy to share.
Thanks.
So when I was kind of walking through my own thought process, I realized that I naturally default to asking questions in all scenarios across life, outside of grief and inside. I think for myself, I'm coming from a place of wanting the complete picture. So I feel like what I'm saying is correct, and I'll put that in quotes since there's never a correct way to respond. So I stepped away from that thought, realizing that to acknowledge someone's grief and to see somebody's grief, we don't need to have answers to all of the questions. So I put that urge to ask questions aside and just went to the thought of, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you for that. And you brought up a really good point, Elijah, because we have enough information. If someone is crying, that's all we need to know. They're sad. We don't need to know why. Our mind wants to know. You know, we want to make sense of things. That's part of our protection. It's like, if I can make sense of this, I can put it into a slot and it'll be more bearable. But that's putting our needs ahead of the griever. And when we can take the moment, like Elijah was talking about, and realize, oh, wow, I like to have more information, then we can put our needs second and the griever's needs first, which is they need our compassion. They need our heart. How about someone else? You can either put it in the chat or speak it out.
Okay, it's Rini here again.
Hi, Rini.
So,
Thanks for...
I found for a moment, I started to go to the place of what would it be like to lose two children to the adoption process versus the natural birth child or children. And I immediately thought, no, the investment, the love and all that, it's there. And I was trying to search for words, what I would say to reassure. And then I kind of went back to my experience, which is just kind of being there with the person who's grieving and be there maybe in silence with them. For me, that was very helpful at times to just have someone be there and witness my grief and my sorrow. And so I don't know that I would have any words of condolence other than I'm so sorry. Just
That's
it.
That's perfect, Rini. And those are words of condolence. And we have the mistaken impression that we need to have something erudite or profound or deeply meaningful. What's meaningful is when we are being heard and seen for the deep pain that we're in. And I'm so sorry is deeply meaningful. And thank you for sharing that little shift, because that is totally normal for people to go, well, let me compare these two. And actually, I had someone say that to me, well, Dana, it's not the same as giving birth to a child and being pregnant and giving birth to a child. And this was from a person who'd never had a baby before. But even if you have had a baby, how would you know unless you've done both? And why are we ranking? Why do we feel that it's important to establish a hierarchy of needs? All right, well, thanks so much for that. So let's look at other question condolences before we move on to the other types of condolences. Oh, was your loss sudden or expected? So what is the hidden message in that? Can anyone think of what the hidden message? is? Well, I'll start out. So when that was said to me, it was like, oh, so I should have been, if it was expected, so I should have been prepared and my loss isn't so great. It was a way of diminishing the loss. And that is very common to have losses diminished. And it's done unconsciously. We don't want to know how badly it hurts. We want to think that it doesn't hurt so badly. Or another was, how long did you have your daughter? Only 13 days? The hidden message in that is, oh, well, then you didn't get too close. So the loss, again, was the loss not being as bad as it was. Someone asked me, what do you suppose the lesson is in this for you? There's so many places that is not helpful. One, it's stepping into my spiritual beliefs without my permission or without even knowing what they are. And it's assuming that I believe what you believe about lessons. And then it's withholding compassion because, well, if you're supposed to learn something from this, then you really don't have a reason to cry. It's the mind versus the heart. And when we're grieving, we need the heart. Does anyone have a question, condolence, that they've ever heard or would like to talk about?
I would agree with you, Dana, that I have heard many times, how did they die? And I think that goes to your point of people want to rank things and they want to put things in, clean buckets and categories. So to know, is this something that I should be worried about with myself or my loved ones? Okay, it's not, so it's fine, or just asking that before they offer any sense of comfort and condolence, just so they can kind of run it through their own thought processes first. And that might be helpful for them, but it's not always helpful, or it's not ever helpful for the person actually grieving.
Right. And I like that distinction. We need to do what we need to do to help ourselves. We just need to recognize that that's for us. It's not for them. And can we decide to put their needs ahead of ours in that moment? And sometimes we can't. When I was grieving, a friend of mine was going through a divorce and she had been a great support to me when we lost our daughter. And once she started talking about her divorce, I couldn't be with her because I was still in deep, dark grief. And so all I could say was, I'm really sorry. I can't be the gal to help you with this, but I know that you're really hurting. And thank you for sharing. And it's fine to not be able to be the one who can listen. There's a step, though, in not placing the griever in harm's way because of that. So another thing that questions do is they're a form of protection. And I used to call them a smokescreen, because when I'm asking you questions, oh, how'd they die? Oh, what happened? How long were they sick? Oh, is the diagnosis terminal? La, 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 la. It's satisfying my mind at your expense. And I'm not revealing anything about myself. I haven't told you how it feels to hear this. I haven't told you about how difficult it is, how worried it makes me feel for the person who is ill or for the person who's grieving a death. I haven't shown you my vulnerability. So questions which are totally appropriate in social situations, we are taught that asking questions is helpful in establishing a camaraderie, that it actually shows interest in other people. But people are not at that place where grievers are not in the place where they can be in a social situation. They're fighting for their survival. So, anyone else have anything to say?
Dana, someone did share in the chat that they've experienced questions about the details of the loss and they're not able to respond in that moment as the griever. And then they spoke to the fact that this brings up again and addresses the pain of having to respond and give information when they're not ready to yet share that information.
That's so great. One thing we can do is we can say, if you would like to tell me anything about what you're going through or about the loss, I'm here to listen, but there's no pressure. And that way we can let them know that when you're ready, if it's ever what you need to do, I'm here for you. So, and questions, when we ask questions, we inform the griever that we don't understand what they need, because what they need is for us to listen and to understand. And asking questions about death details shows that we don't get it. So, all right, so let's move on to suggestion and advice condolences. I'll give you a couple and let's see if we can come up with what the hidden message is and what the roadmap might be to getting back. What a person, if they hear this running through their head, might compost it into something positive. So one is, oh, your husband would want you to be happy. What's the hidden message in that? There's several, but can anyone name one? Your departed husband, wife, sister, brother would want you to be happy. I see someone in the chat says, get over it. Yep, pretty much. So don't be sad. Someone else says, again, it dismisses your grief. And another message is, I can't bear to hear your sadness. So I'm going to tell you something that puts a plug in it. And that's what it does. People will stop, grieving people will stop, and we think we may have helped. Oh, there's another one. Someone is suggesting they're in a better place. That's a suggestion, condolence. What's the problem with they're in a better place? What are the hidden messages in that? So there's no reason to be sad. Because if they're in a good place, why should I be sad?
Dana, I'll add to that. You were talking about imposing your own spiritual beliefs. So maybe that person doesn't believe that there is another place that they would have gone. So when you say something like that without knowing, that person, it's an individual background of beliefs, it could be very dismissive of their own thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
We do have a comment in the chat here.
Great.
So this comment says, the griever is then made to feel guilty for being in pain and grieving, because the griever is not honoring their loved one because the loved one would want them to get over it.
Right. So that is totally perfect, because there's a couple of things in operation there. One, you're being told you need to get over it. And two, worse yet, you're having your loved one explained to you by someone else. And that is arrogant. It's like, you're going to tell me about my husband, you're going to tell me about my daughter. And bottom line is they're dead now, and I'm the one who's trying to learn to live without them. And this is what it's like, learning to live without them.
And we do have another comment in the chat. So they're saying what they heard when they were hearing these comments was that they were not letting their own child rest because their sadness was hurting her.
Oh, no guilt there. So, and that goes, The thing about advice and suggestions is it creates a hierarchy. When I'm giving advice, the unspoken message is, I know more about this than you do, and I have to tell you this. So what I wanted when I was grieving, and what so many grievers wanted, was to know that they were on the even playing field with everyone else, that they weren't uglier or harder to be around or less than or more difficult or more trouble or more of a bummer than anyone else. That they wanted to know that there was parity. And once you start with even the tiniest suggestion, you're saying, I don't trust you to figure this out yourself, so I'm going to say it. And it's demeaning and deflating at a time when grievers feel bad enough. But what can we take away from that? What if that were to come to your mind, like, oh, your husband would want you to be happy? What is the roadmap or pathway out of that? And we can take a second to go inside and say, oh, yeah, I don't really know that's true, do I? Why would I want to say something like that? Okay. Well, probably because I don't want to be feeling all of this. And then if we've said it, we can apologize in the way that I showed earlier. And if we have not said it, but just thought it, as Elijah showed us earlier on, we can make space for something new to show up. Oh, what I'd really like to say is this is so very hard. I don't like to see you hurting like this. I don't like to know that pain like this is happening to you or could happen to anyone, to me or anyone else that we love. So, all right, let's move on to the third type of less than helpful condolences. Helpful to us in learning about ourselves, but not helpful if they happen to come out of our mouths. The third type are pep talks. So, what's a pep talk? Well, at least you went quickly. Well, at least you only had your daughter for 13 days, so you didn't get close. Well, at least you still have your husband. Oh, I could never handle what you're going through. You're so strong. You're much stronger than I am. So what are some of the hidden messages in this? In any of these pep talk type condolences? Well, some of the hidden messages are, oh, here's one. Someone has suggested, well, that the loss is one that can be overcome. Yeah. If I'm saying, well, at least you have this, okay, we're over that now. At least you have other children. Oh, someone said to me, you can adopt another baby. This from my dearest friend who had an adopted child. I was stunned. It took me years to figure out that she really just didn't want me to hurt, because what I heard was, oh, well, because I can adopt another one, I shouldn't be sad about this one. And it was very dismissive. So, well, they lived a good life. Well, they lived a good long life. Yep. So we should be satisfied and not sad. That's the hidden message. So all of these things net out to the same thing. So don't be sad. So don't feel how you're feeling. And when you're grieving, you're pretty insecure about breaking societal conventions. And then to have someone say, don't feel how you feel, that pretty much tanks your sense of self-esteem right there, because they're diminishing your process. Oh, what you're doing and saying is not okay. You should think about it this way instead. Any?
I'll jump in with a comment here. I tend to find myself defaulting to those at least statements when I'm feeling uncomfortable with someone's grief. So for me, an at least statement is my way of dodging it. So I could say, at least there's this amazing thing, and then let's change the subject. So then in those moments, I pause and I think, the best way to get through things is to go straight through them. So I acknowledge that I'm headed through an uncomfortable conversation, and that's okay. And I don't want to disregard their feelings by not addressing them. So that's where I put the at least statements aside and I get to something that will actually help to support them in the moment.
Thank you for that, Elijah. That's really helpful. Because that's how we compost these condolences. The hidden messages are a way of us letting ourselves know why some condolence isn't helpful, either when it's being said to us or when we're saying it. But the composting and using the process that we did earlier today is how we can actually take some time, just a moment, to say, oh, what's actually going on? Yeah, I want it to be better. I want them to get over this quickly because I don't want them to hurt. And also, for me, often it's selfish. I know this person is going to be, my relationship with them is going to be lost to grief for quite a while. And I liked our relationship as it was before their loved one passed away. So once I can notice that, it's like, okay, this is a sacrifice. This is a hardship that every relationship bears in one form or another. And I'm here for them, even though it's not what I wanted. And trust me, the griever wants their old relationship back, if not more than we do, because they're the ones miserable 24/7. All right, the fourth type of condolences that aren't really helpful at first, often, are spiritual condolences. Many spiritual condolences are helpful, and we'll get to those in a minute. But there are spiritual condolences when said initially or before some show of compassion or understanding can feel not helpful. One that was said to me was, God only gives us as much as we can handle. And for me, that was a mandate that I handle my grief. Well, this person's explaining God to me. So I was offended, first of all, that they didn't know that I didn't believe that. They didn't ask, they weren't interested. And that was the time when I couldn't defend myself against their intrusion. And that's a big part of it. If we've had a spiritual relationship with someone before where we share our spiritual ideas, it might be okay to engage in that, maybe not quite at first, but soon thereafter. But if we never have to tread on deeply personal beliefs at a time when they can't defend themselves, it's not thoughtful. And for me, it felt like a one-upsmanship, like now they were God's spokesman. And how could I argue with God? But they're not God, and they're acting like God. So when there's another one that I've heard, everything happens for a reason. What's the hidden message in that? Can anyone think of what that might be? The hidden message is, so I don't have a reason to be sad. or I must have done something, again with the blame, I must have done something to cause this to happen, so I doubly shouldn't be complaining about my loss. And what I can notice, I've had that run through my head. Well, things happen for a reason. I wonder why they think that happened. And I was horrified. This was when someone's friend got killed in a bar fight, and I thought, oh my God, couldn't. I had something judgmental to think about it, and I thought, oh, you are going to be judgmental. These poor people have just lost their son. What difference does it make if it was a bar fight? That makes it worse. Not something that they should be, well, if he shouldn't have been drinking, if he couldn't control his anger, he shouldn't be a drinker. Well, if you're drunk and you're fighting, what do you think's going to happen? So dismissive. But what I did with that was I pulled over in my car and said, you do not get to even think this for 1 second longer. What is happening within you that would make you think that? And it's because it was so hard for me to imagine, to take in all the extra shame that would be involved when someone dies like that. Suicide can be that way. There's a double edge of shame. People who die by suicide, there can be, and the shame can cause us to say shaming things or thinks shaming things. And what I learned from that was, okay, this is an opportunity for me to remember that really hard things happen, and no matter what it looks like, this is a mother and a father who have lost their son. And I need to remain compassionate. And then I could think of a way to reach out.
We do have some comments in the chat.
Great.
So one of them fitting into this spirituality negative comments is God needed more angels. And then
Awesome.
going to your other point, you had talked about kind of not acknowledging somebody's grief and the reasoning behind that, and figuring out the reason within yourself so you could address that. Somebody shared, when you're in the presence of someone grieving, it reminds us of our own grief. So for self-preservation, we try to help them to minimize in quotes, their grief. Thank you both for sharing.
Yeah, that's really profound. It's like we're trying to preserve our self-preservation. We're trying to save ourselves from hurting as much as they would. So these 4 types of condolences are the beginning of a change we can make that we can apply to any conversation where someone is sad about anything. Someone who didn't get a promotion. Oh, you can try next time, or, well, you'll just have to work harder, or it happens. These are all dismissive of maybe they had worked long and hard for this. Maybe their job is everything to them. And without that acknowledgement, they don't have much self-esteem. So we can notice when we have those dismissive thoughts, or even when we say them and come back around and say, we're sorry, but this is what we wish we had said. And we can temporarily make the griever's needs more important than our need to either be right or feel protected or to feel safe. And when people apologized, I cut them a massive amount of slack, even if when they blew it majorly, because they were risking everything to move toward me by apologizing and admitting their mistake. And that resolved everything. I wasn't mad anymore. And it is that vulnerability that was deeply meaningful. So that's the end of my presentation and our workshop together. I'm going to post in chat the topic of the third one of these workshops, which is happening next Wednesday, along with the links. And I would love to open it up to random questions or comments or anything that someone might have to say.
And Dana, what I'll do is I will wrap up the recording right now so that we can have some private space for those of you who would like to share, if any, and you won't be recorded. So I think that might feel a little bit more comfortable. As Dana said, we do have a presentation coming up next week. It'll be the third of a 3-part series with Mission Hospice. And this will be offering meaningful consolation, deep listening for misunderstood losses. So if you'd like to register for that, I will put the link in the chat. And with that, I will turn the recording off and open up some private sharing space.